Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Podcast Strikes Back. My name is George and you're listening to our review of Joker with the boys Connor
Hello.
and Benny.
Hi there.
Well, here we are for the most controversial film of all time, 2019's Joker. We've seen the highs from Venice, you know, with the universal praise, audience, standing ovations, and now we're here. We've seen the lows as well, sorry. You know, we've seen the lows, we've seen all the backlash, everyone talking in the media, and now finally we've sat in the cinema, we've seen the film. It's time to talk, non-spoiler part of the review, spoilers coming later. But actually, before we get into the non-spoiler part of the review, let's catch up on how everyone was feeling about the trailers, the build-up, all that jazz before we get into the movie itself. Who's looking hungry?
Oh, you want to go?
I do.
Okay.
Is there any other way to feel about this movie other than exhausted after all of this time? The discourse around this film has been seemingly endless. What a lead up to a movie that should not be the biggest event of the year. I feel like we've had more to bloody discuss and moralize about this film than, you know, the lead up to Endgame. Just so much hype in the one direction and then all the controversy in the other direction. It was so hard
It's been a bit of a roller coaster, hasn't it?
Exactly. It's so hard to know how to even watch this film when it finally came around outside of all of that. If I can tell a personal anecdote, the cinema I work at actually received a threat of sorts on around the day of release that originated on 4chan, spread through to Reddit, got picked up by a bunch of legitimate publications. Basically, someone just saying, "Don't go to this cinema tomorrow." It looked like any number of other thinly veiled threats that turned out to be real precursors to actual violent events, generally in America. But it was a very interesting opening to this film. And
wait, just going back, even with the Reddit comments going on that thread before it got picked up by all the major publications, you know, people going, "You guys are fucking idiots. This is a joke. Hey, everyone, stay safe. You know, I've called the police." You know, you get a wide spectrum of responses.
I get called in to manage the morning of release, being completely unaware of this. My boss brings me in.
I thought you were about to say being expendable.
Well, why do you think I got called in? My boss sits me down. He's like, "Oh yeah, have you heard about you know?" And I'm like, "About what?" He's like, "We've had a threat against the cinema." I'm like, "All right, cool. Thanks for calling me in today." All day we had a bunch of cops on site, private security monitoring the building, and a lot of interesting looking patrons who
Were you like ducking at like loud noises all day?
Oh man, I was ready. I thought it was all very amusing, but I don't know. I think we lost a bit of business off it. I think we might have gained some from it as well. It just really crazy. I have not seen a movie do this in my time in the industry.
Yeah. Especially, you know, in Australia.
And just to finish off, nothing happened.
Yeah, nothing happened.
We're a week in, nothing's happened yet.
Yeah, it was, and in Australia, you know, we're like the little brother, we're like the little country town compared to UK and US.
But even there, nothing's happened. There's been no shootings.
Exactly. But when these things do happen, it's kind of like a little bit freaky. You know, we're not really used to it here. You know, I don't know. I thought it was, I used to work at the cinema. I was there since 2009. I was just kind of like, oh, this is fucking weird, man. This is unsettling. I found it unsettling. I wasn't even there.
I was 95% sure that it was fake. And the reason that I thought that was because it seemed like that kind of thing that the news had hyped up and made this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy of, you know, we're going to give news time to this and build up the hysteria, and then someone is going to try and capitalize on that hysteria. And then that's going to kind of go, and then we're going to report on it, and it's going to kind of go in this circle. And
oh man, the Daily Mail headline was literally like terrifying terrorism plot or threat
like aimed
at local, mass shooting threat aimed at local cinema. I'm like, and in the article they say exactly what it is, and it's like, don't go to this cinema tomorrow. That's all it is. There was no specific threat there. It's insane though. Like,
but did you see the 4chan comments after that? Did you see the whole thread on
I
the
haven't
4chan?
read the
So
whole
this
thing, no.
other guy goes in and he's like, I booked for that cinema. Now I'm going to cancel and go with my girl to one of the other local cinemas. I've put my affairs in order. I've said bye to my mom. And
I need to see this movie.
incels. And I was like, holy fuck, man, this is crazy. Like this is really something that I haven't really been exposed to other than if it's in the States, if it's in the UK. This is just down the road. Very,
It feels a
very
bit
interesting.
At any rate, because that has nothing to do with the actual film.
Well,
How did you feel? Well, how did you feel about? Because we made a. I mean, I think we can talk about it a little bit now, but we did make a promise. I think about 2 weeks ago that we were going to judge this as a film
On its
It's going to
own.
be tough.
on its own.
It is.
I
It
know
is.
gonna be
It's
very
it's
difficult.
very difficult.
In terms of the trailers, how did you feel about the actual film? Like, how did you feel about? What did you think you were gonna?
Yeah, I guess just briefly, I thought it was an interesting idea for DC to be doing something apart from their main continuity. I thought the trailers all looked really good. I love Joaquin Phoenix, obviously, and I think Todd Phillips is a skilled director. I liked War Dogs a lot. I think his work on the first Hangover, just from a directorial standpoint, is quite strong. So yeah, I was looking forward to it.
Yeah, I was the same. I thought I'm just reading here the Wikipedia. Martin Scorsese was originally producing this.
Yeah, when we originally reported on it, it was back when Scorsese was gonna direct.
And that gave this so much credibility. It it reinforced the notion of the angle they're going to take with it. Joaquin Phoenix, he's always on point. So I love her. I love The Master. He's just always very, very, very watchable. And especially when he sinks his teeth in a role, I find that very, very, I always just find it really interesting. So the trailers came out. It looked interesting. It looked like it was sort of expanding upon the Heath Ledger Joker. I sort of saw a few parallels in there. Maybe I was reading into it too much. But overall, I was really, really excited for this. And then the Venice stuff came out. And I was like, the hype's building a little too much now.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring my expectations down. And I went in sort of thinking, the hype's there, but I hope the film delivers on its promise.
It's almost the last thing you want to hear when you're looking forward to a movie is this is
Yeah.
the best movie ever. It's like,
Like,
damn it.
Fuck.
I was, I think, very different in my approach to this film because I was against it from the get-go. When I first heard that Scorsese was planning on a Joker film outside of the continuity, and this is back when we were still going to get a Jared Leto Joker film as well. You know, that was about the same
when the DCU was barely holding together, as opposed to now when it's just completely
Completely,
shattered.
like,
It's
shattered,
fragmented.
Yeah.
But for me, it was kind of this like I originally didn't like it because it was just throwing this continuity, and it just felt like DC was throwing as much stuff at the wall and just seeing what could stick, and I didn't like that. And then when more details of what this film was came to light, my major concern became that this was less of a Joker film and more of like a taxi driver that needed an IP in order to be, to actually
Big green
get
light.
out. Yeah, exactly. To get it out in the public eye.
Hmm.
And that to me, I didn't like that at all. That kind of bothered me. And I felt as though that might take away from what otherwise would have been a really good film. And then, all the hype, I had a very similar reaction. I was like, this is too much hype now. So I actually came into this movie it was very difficult for me because I was like, I need to watch this as even or as like dispassionately as I can.
Just take it on its own merits kind of thing.
Yeah, because this movie, for me at least, had built this kind of negative, mythos around it. Like it was just, and I didn't want to go in and judge it as such. So, yeah, going into the film, I had to it was kind of like actually take a couple of breaths and being like, I'm going to watch a film. I have to erase everything that I know about this film and just kind of watch it on its own merits.
Cool. So let's get into the non-spoiler part of the review. Where do we want to start here? Because there's a lot of different avenues we can go down.
Can we just start with what I think is by far and large the best thing about this film, and it's almost unarguable?
Yeah, I think
Which
I know
is-
We'll
exactly what
see.
you're going to talk about.
Joaquin Phoenix's performance.
Yeah, he's
is
amazing.
breathtaking.
Yeah, he's on point.
He is always good. Like he's never fails me in terms of an actor, but like this was really spectacularly done. and the range that he showed in this, as well as just the kind of the depth,
The
was
commitment.
the commitment. It was really spectacular.
And this is 100% a character study. This is his movie. He's in every single scene of the film, and he's never less than absolutely magnetic. Like, he carries this entire thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, he feels like he's really thought about the tics of this character, how they present themselves, how he walks, how he talks. You know, it feels like he's really thought about this, and this is an actor's role. You know, he's really taking command, and it's super impressive.
So I was watching an interview done with both Todd Phillips and Joaquin Phoenix, and they were saying that they were in communication for 6 months before they started shooting. You know, just talking to each other, thinking about the character,
That's awesome.
thinking about the scenes, and then even on when they were shooting, Joaquin Phoenix would go home and make notes, and then call like Todd. Apparently, they're just like harassing him, being like, "I think this is like." He would look at dailies and stuff, and so this really feels as though not only was he the main character in this, but it feels as though, or it sounds as though he had quite an integral part in the direction of this film. In kind of, because it is so central around that character, I think he had a lot of input.
It's a very cool approach because we talked about in our weekly show, Scorsese recently came about talking about generally the Marvel movies, saying they're not cinema, very inflammatory comments. But one of the points he made is they're not about humans trying to convey real emotion to each other, which is, I think, an interesting point. I don't think that is the main focus of those movies. This movie, though, really feels like that kind of thing, you know? Like, it really feels like an actor and a team of people trying to convey something,
Yeah.
whether or not they're entirely successful.
Yeah, these are the moments I really love. You know, we'll talk about some other elements with the film, but you know, when you get an actor just owning it, like really, like, you know, this is his profession. This is what he's dedicated his life to. This is his craft. You know, I love seeing those moments. 'Cause it's almost like seeing like a bird, you know, take flight. It's like they're really in their element, and I get such a kick out of that. Because I couldn't act to save my fucking life.
I mean, and also Joaquin is very good at picking his roles, and you can see it. Like, you know, it almost seems as though he picks these roles as his own like kind of personal therapy session. You know, when he talks about, like, you know, you talked about The Master. That's very kind of specific to his life. You know, he was part of a cult. You know, with this one, he even talked about it in the interview, which is that one of the things that really drew him to this character and provided sympathy for this character for him was the early childhood trauma, which he also suffered. I mean, like, he seems to put quite a bit of himself into these roles. Whether that's good for his own mental health is probably a different discussion, but it certainly yields results in terms of being an actor or
So
putting stuff on screen.
So Joaquin is 10 out of 10. I think we're all on the same page there.
Yeah.
The other star of this film is, of course, director Todd Phillips,
Yes.
who is aiming to do something far above what anyone would have previously expected, I think, from the director of the Hangover trilogy.
Yes.
How do you guys think he fared?
I think that, you know, he was a screenwriter on this along with Scott Silver. I think that he's done an amazing job. Like, I really do love a lot of elements of this. I think in terms of the cinematography choices, I think in terms of the pacing and editing, and the overall direction, it is a really, really interesting way to present the Joker in 2019. I think that the script gets pretty bog standard in spots. It's
Yeah.
like, and we can get into that maybe in spoilers or a bit later, but like, I've seen this before, you know, like, oh, this seems very sort of
Almost generic.
Generic, yeah.
Yeah.
And incredibly on the nose in parts.
But-
Whoever wrote this script was like clearly at certain points at a loss for, you know,
Yeah.
words almost. 'Cause
And
he's
I'm
like,
kind of like, wow, Joaquin is just owning it right now. And if you didn't have that guy on the bench, I don't know if this film would be nearly as good.
there's some stuff that comes off that would have been very, very almost painful if it weren't for the slight inflections or just the way that is emoted.
And the strength in most of the other areas as well. Because, there is some stuff in this. It's like there's a movie that runs along a long part of its runtime working in some subtext, and then at points it just goes like text.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, wow, when did this turn into a
Yeah.
lecture? But The other, yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, because you said the other person in this. I think there's actually three. And I think there's someone that has to be pointed out in this. It's Hildur. I'm not going to be able to pronounce the last name, though.
Do it.
Guando Ditro. It's from someone from Iceland. That should give you an idea of what the last name
score?
sounds. This is the score,
Yes, the amazing score.
which is, I think, the combination of those three people. And I don't think this person is getting any credit because everything is like Todd Phillips and Joaquin
I
Phoenix.
totally
and
agree.
And that's 5% of the conversation. The rest is all like the violence.
Well, yeah, exactly right. Like the praise that is being given to this film is those two people, and I think that is a massive disservice. I think that Hildur did an absolutely spectacular job of this, and she's been involved with some, like she's been involved with like Arrival and a couple of other, like I had never really heard of her, but Arrival, she was part of the music department.
Right.
Sicario.
So she must
The
work
Revenant.
with, what's his name?
Very nice.
He's
Hans Johannesson.
Yeah,
Yeah. So she was actually like playing cello and doing that
right.
kind of stuff.
Because he's
with all these-
Icelandic as well, I believe, from memory.
Yeah. So she composed Joker, Chernobyl,
Oh,
something called Trapped, Sicario,
fantastic.
Day of the Salado, not the other one.
There was some really great cello work in this. I've always been a big fan of cello, that lower rumbling before it hits the double bass. It's just got more attack, but
Yeah.
it was just so well done.
So it seems like she is a celloist, which makes so much sense considering that there is so many of those kind of like that really sound like you get with the string instruments, the lower string instruments.
One thing I noticed, which I didn't necessarily find distracting, but it used the same note difference in that they use in the Hans Zimmer wrote for Batman. So the da na, I believe it's a fifth. Like this one had like a da na na, and it went up to another note. But I noticed that coming through, and I was like, is this purposeful? Or am I just reading
kind of
into
masterful
that?
because it's not on the nose, like it's not like clearly that song, but it could be a variation.
Yeah.
Which I think would be really cool.
But I always loved that Batman theme because it wasn't like a theme. It was two notes, but it's so recognizable. And I thought, hey, maybe they've just sprinkled this in. But you know what? I thought she did an amazing job and really added to the atmosphere.
Yeah.
It was brilliant. It was absolutely haunting.
I would love to
in this
see her on
movie.
more projects because I think that a good score makes or breaks films. Like if you think about 2049, if you think about Inception, if you think about all these, Arrival, all these films that would be half of the films that they are without the brilliant score that they have.
So, Georgie, you mentioned how the film looks. Let's just harp on about that for a while because I think every aspect of the visuals on screen here is unbelievably on point.
So well shot.
The cinematography, the recreation of this grimy 1980s kind of New York vibe for Gotham.
Yeah.
The Gotham landscapes are beautifully done. Like you barely notice the changes that are made on those landscapes.
And it's quite nebulous in terms of the era. It could have been 70s, could have been 80s, could have been 90s. Unless I missed that, I felt like it did a pretty good job of...
There was a very similar time in New York, I think around the 70s or 80s, where there was like a garbage strike.
Okay.
So it felt to me like it was lifted from a very specific time.
Okay,
in
sure.
New York's
There is a
history.
fact in this movie. There's something that puts it right in 1981. I can't remember what it is exactly. So
Okay.
sorry, I sound like I'm making it up, but
Yeah.
I believe that is the exact year. But so I work as a projectionist. I'm projecting this film in 70mm, so I get to
I'm
just sit
disappointed
there.
I didn't get to see it in 70 mil.
Oh man, come in and watch it. I get to just sit there and watch every frame of this beautiful movie, whenever I want. It's just it's so beautiful.
It's it's a couple of interesting things I noticed about it. I think it's a 16:9 ratio. It's not that really thin, letterbox style. So it makes things quite tall, and he fits a lot of things in the frame and makes a lot of shots quite bottom heavy. I thought that was just like a really interesting choice because a lot of film directors go movie, letterbox, but this is a bit of a wider style. So I thought that was quite interesting. And then I also found it quite saturated. It was quite bright in spots. I sort of, you could have gone quite easily down that Nolan, grimy, desaturated look. But it's quite beautiful. It's quite, the production design's beautiful. Like even the way he dresses, it's like clean and, I thought like aesthetically, production design, the grading, it was just all really nicely put together.
And the leading on
And
from
distinct
that,
and distinct.
yes, yeah. I do not see many movies that look like this for whatever reason. It recreates that era so perfectly, but it's not flashy about it. Like the whole
Yeah.
thing is
Yeah.
just
It's
seeped
not
in
like Stranger
garbage.
Things where it's like, this is the 70s.
Yeah.
You're like,
It's
"Ooh, all right."
it's so deft. And leading on from that, the costume design. I think the lead up into him really becoming the Joker, just bit by bit, his outfit kind of really subtly heads that way. And then when the full transformation is complete, the look has really grown on me.
Yeah,
I think he looks
amazing.
outstanding.
I think
Yeah.
it looks so good.
There's a scene at the very end where you're just like, this is so utterly spot on for
Was
the
that
Joker.
the bit from the trailer that he's just walking down that corridor and he's just like
That is pretty
looking very serious, but he's got that big smile on his
Mm.
face. It's gorgeous, and he's this weird mix of Heath Ledger's Joker combined with like Cesar Romero from the '60s.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
distinct but
yeah.
familiar all at once. It's really cool. So everyone has, and I don't think unjustly pointed out that this movie is a massive ripoff of Taxi Driver and The King of Comedy, two Scorsese films.
I've
And
never seen The King of Comedy.
Falling Down. I haven't either, so that has not been an issue for me. And Falling Down, another one. How do you guys feel about how derivative this movie is?
As a massive fan of Taxi Driver, I thought that it did enough to change it up so it wasn't plagiarism.
Now, Connor, Taxi Driver, King of Comedy, have you seen both? Neither? One?
Neither.
Neither? Okay, cool.
Taxi Driver is one of those ones that is always on the to-do list, but I'm like, it's not going anywhere.
So, Georgie, you and I have seen Taxi Driver. None of us have seen King of Comedy. I think that's important to point out, I guess, because both of those films in equal measure, from what I understand.
Okay, right.
So yeah, I found it didn't bother me at all.
No. But there are a couple really distinct differences that they do within Robert De Niro's character in Taxi Driver, Travis Bickle, and this. And I think we should talk about those in spoilers.
Yeah.
But those were very interesting choices and things that maybe impact my viewing of it in a certain way. I'm being a bit cryptic here, but I like the homage, the steps and like I guess I'm still thinking back to how Scorsese was a producer. I thought it was cool.
Yeah.
But it didn't, and to me it didn't feel like, oh look, they're just ripping off, they like Taxi Driver. No, I was like, they're trying to weave that into the narrative and it's making sense.
So this movie is so in the spotlight right now. I feel like it's getting unfairly targeted for being derivative. I think it is derivative, but I think so much of art is.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
It's really hard to find something that is well and truly actually original.
Yeah,
And in
something-
terms of how original this is compared to all the other movies that are coming out now, I mean, you got to give it a break. Taxi Driver was what, like 30 years ago?
Yes, 70s, 77.
40
Yeah,
years ago
yeah.
then? Like, I mean, you just...
Yeah, like this
50 years ago?
This movie is so refreshing compared to all the other comic book blockbusters that are coming out. I don't understand why everyone's targeting it for that so specifically.
I think people are looking... I think some people are
Sort of
looking for a
punching bag
reason to hate
there
this.
are, yeah. Where
I mean, and there are. This isn't a perfect movie, and I'm happy to talk about the things that I didn't like about this movie. But
that was not something that bothered me specifically.
No, didn't bother me.
is there anything that in non-spoilers, because there is something that I'd probably want to talk about a little bit, but is there anything that you guys can think of that you want to talk about that was positive?
No, I think in terms of the main positives, the whole presentation, the technical side of it, and Joaquin Phoenix, that it's really on point. This is a really well made film.
Yeah, I would say there are a bunch of sequences in here that I think are virtually like a masterclass of like boiling tension.
Oh yeah.
Like watching some of those scenes in a cinema was like very intense and very
Yes.
cool.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'll go in then. There's some things that I can't talk without it being in spoilers. So check out the spoiler review. But one thing I did want to talk about, and I've been thinking about this a lot, was there was an obvious sense of nihilism about this film, and to the point of almost kind of like beating you over the head with it. And I was trying to think of a good analogy for how I felt about how that was presented in this film. And the best way I could think of it was like Todd Phillips was giving you like a cake, like, one of those like really rich, sweet, like mud chocolate cakes things, and being like, hey buddy, why don't you take a bite? And be like, that was really tasty. And he goes, why don't you take another bite? I'm like, okay. And he's like, now eat the entire cake. And you're like, this was really good, like for a snack, but eating this all in one sitting it's too much. And it's not because the cake has changed. Like, it's not like a better cake or a worse cake towards the end. It's the same thing.
Mm.
But it's just kind of like I've had nothing to complement this or nothing to break it up, or it's just this like kind of unrelenting.
If you take one bite, you got to eat the whole thing, baby.
And that's the thing. And I kind of felt like towards the end of this film, there was no counter. There was no companion. There was no, I just want a coffee while I have my cake. Just something to kind of complement what I was getting at. And I felt like, that sat with me a little wrong.
I know what you mean, and I think this is where some of the rudimentary choices they made with the script. I mean, you see it at the beginning. It's not a spoiler. He's running down. The kids are beating him over with the sign and kicking him down. It's like he's actually getting kicked down by society.
Yeah, and one of them's literally like, "Get him, he's weak."
Yeah.
And it's like, are they mugging him or are they just beating the shit out of him for no reason?
Yeah,
and it's kind of unclear in the movie.
Yeah, so there's a few of those things where I'm like, all right, I know where this is going. And then that's pretty near the beginning, and it just keeps kind of punching away. And I think it gets fairly rudimentary in some spots. I think the arc of the character is sold on the performance, but not necessarily in all of the story choices. And ultimately, some of the messages towards the end, whilst it's got nothing to do with incels, nothing, I have a few problems with some of the choices they made within some of the storytelling and some of the in terms of it's representation of mental health and whatnot.
Yeah, for me, some of it, the issue that I think we might be clicking on the same thing is more around the tonality. Like, it's not necessarily what the plot is; it's how the movie approaches that plot, which just kind of left me with a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. And that might not be a bad thing. Like, this movie is obviously meant to provoke, and I haven't stopped thinking about it.
Same.
So, maybe that's the point. And I'm just not smart enough to get it or
I don't think
understand
that's
it.
the problem with this movie.
But I want to talk a little bit more about it in spoilers. But I do feel as though that this movie is a little bit simplistic in the way that it approaches that nihilism and that kind of just the way that it presents it.
Well, it is just a comic book movie. And on that note, Connor, that was one of your big misgivings on the way in. How do you feel about it now as a DC property?
So in terms of,
do you feel like that was just
is it being a Joker film? Do
you feel like that was just
anything?
a cynical sheen that was thrown on it?
I do, but there are some things that actually, oddly enough, added, and I don't think it was the intention, but there was a couple of moments where, and I'll explain it more in the spoilers, that I was glad that it was a Joker film. Not to say that this movie would have been vastly different without it. Like, I mean, I still think that the only reason that it is a Joker film is because I needed an IP.
And they've been open about that.
So yeah, I kind of, there's probably a net zero gain or loss here, because what you lose in the kind of jaded, the kind of the jaded business aspect of just getting an IP. There's a couple of things that added to it. But
I was quite happy the way it tied itself into the Batman mythos. I thought it was a worthwhile kind of alternate origin of this character. As a comic book fan, I was definitely getting more out of this than I would be if it was just a drama. From that sort of stuff, like just being like, oh yeah, this is exciting.
We might have the same idea on a couple of things. Like it saved a couple of things for me. In fact,
that's interesting. Because I think, love it or hate it, it really is a business, and it's kind of hard to criticize the fact that this movie is now setting the highest ever opening for an October film.
Yeah,
when it would have done 10% of that maybe.
Yeah,
otherwise
easily.
I mean, getting something in front of eyeballs, that's cool. That's important for these people for financial and creative reasons.
And there's a lot of stuff in here. I was actually quite impressed with how it tied into the Batman universe, and it made you recontextualize things. And not quite what you wanted, Connor, where you had a real distinct counter to the Joker, But I think there was just a few little details in there. And I was like, oh, okay, that's an interesting take. I need a little bit of time to think about that. But then there were some moments in here I was like, really? We'll talk about it as follows. Really?
Oh yeah.
Are we going down this path again? Sorry, maybe.
Yeah, I think we know exactly what you're talking about. But
yeah.
well, why don't we give our final thoughts?
So Joker's definitely not as good as Venice said. There's just some things in here that didn't quite work for me, but in terms of like technical side of filmmaking, you know, we're talking acting, we're talking cinematography, we're talking music, talking editing, we're talking set design. Like this is just so on point. And I'm going to say 80-70% of the script worked for me. You know, so I'd say this is a really, really good, really great film. And it's going to be I'm just going to be up there in my list, if not in my top 10 of the year for sure.
Yeah. I will 100% agree with you in terms of this could very easily make it into my top 10 this year. It's really unfortunate that it got that kind of hype from Venice because I don't think it quite reaches that level. Like
I might enjoy it more not knowing, being predisposed to that information.
And this won't be like the, you know, in the top 10 films of the last 10 years or anything. Like it's not that kind of level. But it is a very good film. I mean, it's one of those films that feels as though it might just be a little bit less than the sum of its parts, though.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. It's a shame that this movie had so many talking points about it in all different ways leading up to it.
Other than the film.
Other than the film,
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Because I think it is. I love this movie. I think it's really terrific. I think it is 10 out of 10 on so many individual levels that makes it worthwhile alone. And there are definitely parts where it doesn't work, definitely parts where it's over the top, parts where it doesn't entirely come together. And I do think it's going to speak to a subset of people that I don't think it's actually has a message for necessarily. But the Joker has always done that. Characters have always done that.
Yes.
Taxi Driver did that 40 years ago.
Yeah.
That's a whole different debate anyway. But yeah, like I said, I really, really enjoyed this movie. I've seen it twice now. I've seen it twice before it came out, but that's just, you know, work privileges.
Podcast
privileges. And I will happily go see it again.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. I recommend going to see this movie and making your own mind up about it.
Yeah, this is definitely one of those ones where I'd say check it out in the cinema. It is worth it. I mean,
also support film, watch it in 70mm.
Yeah,
definitely.
Love it or hate it, like you'll get something out of this. Like you'll come out wanting to talk about it, which is
also it's just a movie.
That too.
it's not going to make you go riot or kill anybody, probably, unless you're maybe already going to do that. It's just
if this is what pushes you over the edge, then you know this is the least of your problems.
Yeah,
it's so interesting. Just off that, it's a movie thing. Like, you know, you hear about Taxi Driver, all the controversy at the time. You hear about The Exorcist, all the controversy at the time. You know, at the end of the day, you watch those ones now, and everyone's like, "What? That was the scariest movie of all time." Really? You guys need to harden the fuck up. So, you know, I'm interested to see the life cycle of this movie, and I'm interested to see, I feel like it's been 10, 20 years since one of these has popped up. I don't think there's been this mass hysteria. At least I can't remember that kind of mass hysteria.
Not with a major blockbuster film.
I can't remember the last time.
Like there's lots of films that are far more controversial.
Like dinky little horrors.
Yeah, you'll get like stuff on a very
Serbian
small scale like
yeah,
that. Yeah, that gets banned in a bunch of countries.
But like that's probably more rightfully so. Like that, you don't need that. There's no kind of like they can't be like we're just trying to like hold a mirror to no. Fuck you. That's
and
just...
I'd love to be able to say that it's good that they've gotten a conversation started, but they haven't. There's no conversation here.
Yeah,
it's just like yelling in all different corners.
And headline reading. And...
I think there's a lot of good conversations to come out of this that no one is having, or that everyone's doing exactly what we're doing, which is people should have that conversation and then go right back into like all the talking points.
So to reiterate, just finally, go see this movie, give it a go.
Yes,
let us know what you think.
You'll get something
of the movie.
Yeah, drop it in the comments, guys. We want to hear from you guys. We all really enjoyed it.